Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where only newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Diamine, and in sample form, Passion Red. And apparently I just wanted to torture myself, because this ink nearly infuriated me as much as yesterday's ink. But, yeah. Diamine, what are you doing? What's going on? What's wrong with you? Yeah, this ink and I had some issues. The pens that were used was, one of them was this ToPlatinum Preppy with a 03 or a fine nib. Preppies are known to be fairly dry writing, very moderate. And then I also have this Sheaffer Schol Pen, which they don't make anymore, and which, even though it has an F on the nib, if the camera will ever focus, it's actually more like a medium, and actually it's a fairly wet nib. So when I first put it in this, I was like, okay, maybe something a little more moderate. Went for this. Problems will arise. Thought I'd compare it to a couple other inks. Here we have Passion Red up at the top. Here we have Diamine's Hope Pink, Noodler's Black Swan and English Roses, Gerabon's L'Âme de Cassis, Diatramentis Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, Diatramentis Cherry, Diamine Poppy Red, and Diatramentis Thomas Alva Edison. Now this Poppy Red is supposed to be like a bright poppy pink, you know, almost pinkish, or I mean red, but you know, almost pinkish. This is just not even that dark. Here's Passion Red again. As you can see, it's quite thin. But here's Roran Klinger's Morinda, Chesterfield's Antique Crimson, Ackerman number 19, Rude Hags Pluche. I apologize to anyone who ever spoke Dutch. Levenger's Cardinal Red, which is sort of a pink, and Diatramentis Ruby Red, which is actually more of a magenta. But yeah, so let's check out the chromatography, shall we? See how it's pink here? It's like flamingo pink. And see how it doesn't resist water at all? Then see how when it dries, absolutely nothing changes? Yeah, okay, moving on. Top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, it's pink. Passion Red is not red, and also I mean, like I say here, it like makes me wonder what Diamine knows about passion. Is this commentary? Because it's very thin and watery. Yeah, it's not great. The Preppy, the fine Preppy, took 5.5 seconds to dry. The medium-ish Sheaffer took 8. Because it's so watery, you do get some very distinct shading. So if you like shading, that's cool. But like I said, the Sheaffer is actually kind of wet, so it comes out a much more solid, darker color. But yeah, it's well behaved in that there's no bleed, there's no feather, there's no spread, there's no echo, there's no sheen. But there's also no water resistance, and it's actually a very... I mean, this looks like children's watercolors, you know, it's not... It's like, oh, they're gonna make a mess, make it easy to clean. It's not great. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where dry times are actually the same. The Preppy took 5.5 and the Sheaffer took 8. And again, you get some very distinct shading. I mean, look at how dark and then sort of like medium, light, almost not there. It's very thin. Even at the darkest parts, you can still see the dots from the dot pad. I mean, it's pink. It's almost like a dark flamingo pink. It's a bit weird. Yeah, it's, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no sheen. There's no echo because it's so darn light. In that regard, it's all great. It washes away like nothing. And, yeah. Next is Tomoe River Paper, which, because of the way it sort of forces ink to pool, it usually brings out shading in an ink, but here it really just highlights how thin this ink can be. Dry times were just a touch longer, which is normal for Tomoe River. The fine Preppy took 6 seconds, whereas the Sheaffer now took 9. If I had to pick which pen, I definitely picked the Sheaffer because it's just a lot more solid. There's not as much shading, but it's, I mean, look at how thin that is in the Preppy. But yeah, and again, same all over again. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no sheen. It's so light that, I mean, except for the scrubbies, there's essentially no echo. It did make a bit of a mess, which was weird. Dyed the page, but yeah, I mean, honestly, what you're seeing there is actually the impression of the writing on the paper because it's so thin. So, yeah. Next up is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, where just sort of for fun, I mean, usually I use the most moderate of the pens, but I thought I'd include the Sheaffer as well. Yeah, both did pretty darn bad. Preppy did 2 seconds, dried in 2 seconds. The Sheaffer dried in 2. You can still see a distinct difference in the darkness of the ink, Preppy versus Sheaffer, but the Preppy had trouble keeping up with the absorbency of the paper. You know, I had to like shake it to bring more ink down into the feed so that it would be readily there for the nib, because this paper was just sucking the ink out of the nib. And yeah, there's no bleed with the Preppy. There is some very near show through with the Sheaffer. Both have feathers, both have some spread, but and both have sort of equally bad water tests, except the Sheaffer, since it puts down more ink, you know, it's harder to wash all of it out, so it's a bit darker, but yep. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where I did only use the Preppy, because after this I was like, alright, let's be fair, just the Preppy. And you know what? It did okay. Not great, but okay. It took 1 second to dry. There's some shading, but really all it does is highlight how thin this ink is. Yeah, it had trouble keeping up with this paper as well. There's no feathering, so that's nice. There are no feathers here. There's a tiny bit of spread. There is some I guess we could call that full bleed, but there's some extremely close near bleed through all throughout. Not encouraging. And this paper hates water anyway, but that's still a pretty bad water test. It's mostly gone, and it did feather and explode a bit. Now, lastly is Moleskin Notebook Paper, which sort of changed the quality of the ink. It almost made it more of a peachy color. I mean, I guess that could be because of the cream paper, but I mean, the Tumbleaway River paper is cream too, and it didn't have quite the same effect, so meh. But yeah, the dry times were weirdly long. And the Preppy took 4.5 seconds to dry, and the Sheaffer took 7, nearly as long as the premium papers. There's an extreme wooliness to the texture. There is an insane amount of feathering. And again, since there's still kind of shading, still all it does is highlight the thin and wateriness of the ink. It's not great, and again, here I use the Sheaffer again as well, just, I don't know, for funsies, I guess. And it dyed the page, it exploded, most of it washed away, that's almost illegible. But, yeah, only the Sheaffer really came close to bleeding through in spots, but, yeah. Oh, I wrote on both sides to see if I had gotten the laid or unlaid side of the paper, and this is the laid side. This is the good side. The unlaid side was actually even worse, so yeah. There you go, I guess. There's Diamine's Passion Red. I hate it. But, yeah, no, I mean, it's in a very dry writing pen, one that writes so dry that it can't keep up with the absorbency of the paper. It does very well on cheap paper. It's not red, it's pink. It's the opposite of passionate color of red. It's sort of a weak, watery thing. But, as always, if you love this ink, I'm sure you have your reasons, and all the more power to you. But, personally, I hated it. So, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.